And I'm thinking it's just easier to lecture. Like, this movie has cool parts in it, but it also is like a whole period, and I don't know.
For a second, yeah.
Cemetery?
Oh, yeah. 342. Yeah. This page. Don't look at that. You're gonna be a fish.
Oh, it's so annoying.
Just drop it. Yeah, like it drops so hard.
More kids? Sarah, what broke on your phone?
It says no SIM card installed. So I crossed it down and then like went on to the next one.
All phones, yeah. Well, not all, but
Would you ride?
that's kind of what gives me.
It's like,
Next to your neck.
But can you take it out?
yeah,
No, SIM card.
Yeah,
you just press on that little thing.
What is that?
Oh wait, no, where it is, right here.
What does that do?
You just press the little paper clip in there. Oh, my phone is all rusty.
You know what you do with Android? You go like this.
Take off the whole back.
Go like this.
Can you replace like pieces that are Android?
Yeah,
You can do that with iPhone.
it's a lot harder with iPhone. Because it's like you can do it with any phone. It's just harder with iPhone.
You can, there's people who've like figured out how to do it. It's like if you need like little tools and stuff, and you can like replace your screen.
Yeah.
Some reminders for you. Tonight's after-school environmental film is totally, completely, extremely, really, honestly awesome. What? Oh, yeah. And Jake gets to go. The movie's called The End of the Line. It's about global fishery collapse. This one it's kind of like a high budget movie, so it's like really beautiful. Like the end of the line. Yeah, and fishing reached the end of the line. Can't get any more fish. It's about global overfishing. The visuals, film quality editing, they're like really top notch. There's some like unbelievably beautiful footage of sea life, like really spectacular. Really top notch science in there. Like the scientists who speak in this movie are like the scientists in this topic, like real deal. It's not like some chump change little bits of science. It's like they interviewed the guy and the other guy and the other guy, that one lady, like. But I have to warn every single one of you that because this is about industrial fishing, you might see some people who aren't exactly gentle when they handle the seafood. Like, I think a lot of you want to believe that fishing is all like catch and release with like really nice gloves and barbless hooks and like just like really carefully put the fish back if you're not going to eat it. But at the industrial fishing, it's like a floating factory where the workers are like grumpy and in a hurry and do that all the time. And it's like pretty heinous. like the way that people treat fish, it's not like snuggly, like gentle at all. Like there's a scene where they kill like a big old swordfish by hitting it on the head with a sledgehammer. And actually, that's common. I mean, you might imagine that swordfish are kind of dangerous. You can't leave them flapping around on the deck because of the sword. And you can't shoot them because you're on a boat. And bullets make holes in boats and people sink and drown. And they're like big old fish, you know, like from me to Jake is the size of the fish, and then the spear goes through the whiteboard. So, you know, if you got to kill one of these things, you don't have a lot of choices, and so sledgehammers are actually the way that people do it. But a lot of my kids, when they show up, and there's this like close-up of like the fish head, like it's like kind of understandably heavy. You know, I recommend this movie highly. I loaned it to my mom and dad. I don't think it's going to like traumatize you. You watch television with like people shooting people and like exploding brains, and you've probably seen some fairly graphic descriptions of some pretty horrible stuff. I just want to throw that out there in case you have a sensitive composition. Yeah. It's like an hour and a half, like everything else. 6 p.m.
Speaking of exploding, did you see the NASA rocket exploded as it launched?
Yes, except did you know it's not NASA?
Yeah, it was the president.
And so this presents a really interesting thing as the U.S. government starts to privatize more and more of our fundamental functions, like our military is largely privatized now, and our space exploration is becoming more privatized, like who's responsible, like how does this bode for the investment, like we sort of have a big old budget that we can like have some failure in the system and still keep going, but yeah. But yes, I did see, pretty gnarly. And this is bringing up memories of an event that all of you were like not even remotely alive for, but there was this Challenger explosion when I was a little younger than you. A space shuttle blew up with a bunch of astronauts on it, and that was like a really touchy moment for space exploration. People were like, why are we even trying? Everybody's dying, like why bother with this? And so like a lot of those memories were coming up for me because of the blowing up space exploration question. Okay, blowing up. Tomorrow is your pre-lab for the soil lab. Warning number 1, don't forget the 2 cups of dirt. Warning number 2, this is a really detailed pre-lab. Salinization was like the most candy cane pre-lab. Tomorrow's pre-lab is like super detailed. There's 2 parts to the lab, so there's 2 procedures with 2 sets of materials. I just want to warn you to please focus on the details for tomorrow's pre-lab. Did I already ask you for bathtubs?
Yes.
Thank you for those of you that kept an eye out and saw that one on the street. Yeah?
Yeah, I saw one.
Olive and...
Yeah.
And have I already invited you to come fishing with me on the day of your exam?
No.
Exam.
On November 7th, we have a pep rally scheduled and we have the Unit 4 exam. Because we have a test and I don't need to be here to hand out papers, I'm going to peace out. That said, when they asked me to invite my students, I was like, no, I can't invite my students because they have a test, and I got to invite them to be here in my class on the day of the test, not invite them to go fishing with us. But then I realized that some of my students are actually taking Marine Bio 2, and so because some of my kids are already going to be missing the test for the fishing trip, it seems unfair to invite the rest of you. Unfair to not invite the rest of you. So everybody who wants to go, $60 if you have your own tackle and your own fishing license. If not, you got to add the price of the tackle and add the price of the fishing license. We're going to go on the Stardust out of the harbor, meet there at 7, get back around 1. You're excused for the whole day. probably be fishing the bottom, so I'm guessing like rockfish and lingcod. Depends on the weather. We might be fishing shallower water depending on what's going on. Would anybody like a packet to go fishing on November 7th? You have to still take your makeup test when you get back. And apparently there's some urgency to this. If you're gonna go, you have to pay. I'm guessing me. Yeah, you can just bring the money to me, and I'll get it to the right people. Checkmate out to SBHS. I have to warn you. The $60 is just to go on the boat. Like, I have my own fishing license, and I have my... Do you still need to pay for it?
No. But how long in the period is that?
They're going to be like a little bit shorter because of the pep rally. So I don't know how much. Probably 45, isn't it? They take... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. Yeah, they're probably going to be 47, 48 minutes shorter. Sorry. 47, 48 minutes total.
So, say you're like one of the only ones that is actually in class and everyone else is fishing. Do you still have to take the test?
The test will happen in my class. Only a couple kids are going to miss any classes. Yeah. Most of my students are going to be here taking the test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How much is it for the tackle and the fishing license?
So the tackle, if I'm not mistaken, I think Homeboy on the Boat has that money. Donnie Warwicker has the tackle. So I think tackle we can cover. Donnie Warwicker has it. But I think if you don't have a rod and reel, the rental is $10. And I think a day fishing license, anybody know what that costs, a one-day fishing license? Probably $10, $15. Sam can look it up. And by the way, usually, just so you know, a lot of people end up buying food on the boat because they have like this kitchen that cooks like unbelievable food, and so like when you smell it, it's like, oh please, like. So a lot of people will get like either a breakfast burrito or a fish sandwich or a cheeseburger, like they're stellar. That's like another $7 to $10 depending how much you have, and then what's the other thing? Filleting. Like, if you don't know how to fillet the fish, they'll fillet them for you, but they charge you $1 a fish. So if you catch your limit of 10 rockfish, and you need $10 for fillets. Like I usually fillet my own because I need the guts to feed my chickens and stuff. For me, I walk out with the whole fish, but if you don't know how to fillet, it's not easy to learn on rockfish. Like, they are one of the more challenging fish for a learner. Anybody else want to ask anything else about fishing Friday the 7th? I'm pretty sure we need to have a head count like by this Friday, but I don't know. I'm not like setting any deadlines. They were like, "Oh, you gotta hurry up." I don't know, man. And I was like, "Okay." Well, okay. Anything else about this stuff? You need a California resident saltwater day.
$14.
$14. That's what I thought. Where did we leave off yesterday? How many of you already have a fishing license and your own fishing tackle and you like do your own fishing thing? Okay. But none of you going on the cattle boat. Okay. Where did we get to yesterday? We got to 4.2. Oh yeah, we did the adding eutrophication number 15. Did we talk Dust Bowl?
Oh, yeah, we're on 17. Yeah.
Perfect, spectacular, awesome, beautifulness. Because we went so quickly, I need to step back in time a teeny little bit. In number 15, we said this. What's the difference? Let's do the warm-up first. What are these two things? Yes?
Erosion is like the loss of soil, and desertification is turning fertile soil into desert soil.
Yeah, basically exactly right. Watch me. loss of soil. It's got to go somewhere, like water or wind. This is the loss of soil quality. So the dirt is still mostly there, but it's just gotten really crappy. Like it gets too salty for life to work, or it gets too much chemical warfare for the soil ecosystem, or it gets too intensely used up so there's no nutrients left. Now watch this. This is the part where my students sometimes get confused. That often leads to this. Because when the quality goes down, nothing will grow there. When nothing grows there, it's easier for it to fly away. Got that?
So desertification leads to erosion, or the other way around?
That way. Desertification leads to erosion, yeah, very often. Because if the soil quality is really low, then nothing can live there. If nothing can live there, then it's just going to start flying away or washing away. And there's one special secret ingredient. Remember, I told you yesterday, I think. What's the magic ingredient to guarantee soil quality? What was the right way to keep plants happy?
Crop rotation.
Yes, but what in the soil? What characteristic of soil makes it really healthy and good? Yeah.
Arable.
Arable is the word. Sorry, maybe I'm just not asking the right question.
Like it's not living ecosystem.
Yeah, the food web, the soil food web. That's the actual That's the magic that happens, and that's what I wanted to say before we get to number 17. Anything that threatens that soil food web starts this process. So too many chemicals that kill off the soil food web, the loss of humic material will kill off the soil food web, and that's how you end up desertifying. In number 17, I assume you all got these. Let's just make sure that this is what your book had. O, A, E, B, C, and bedrock. Is that correct? O, A, E, B, and C over bedrock. So A, B, C with O on top and E between A and B. It seems like some of you are getting that and some of you are not.
How is bedrock? It's R. So.
Oh yeah, a bedrock is R, yeah. So the surface litter on top is also known as mulch, and you have to know that word. O equals surface litter equals mulch. Very important because it slows evaporation and provides organic material. So O equals surface litter equals mulch. And it insulates and shades and traps moisture, prevents evaporation, good times. A is where the magic happens. A is the topsoil. That's the humus, not humus. That's where all those organisms do all that nutrient cycling. Grasslands have a lot of A horizon. That's why they're good for farms, because they have a lot of topsoil. And I've got some interesting facts for you about the soil food web, which lives in A. Every soil everywhere has the same basic groups of critters. Every soil everywhere on the planet has some amount of bacteria, some amount of protozoans, some amount of nematodes, some amount of fungus. And please look up at the back wall. Right along the top, there's this staggered set of soils. The grassland, the desert, the rainforest, a tide pool, a forest woodland, and the alpine tundra. All of these have the same ingredients in the food web, just in different numbers. more bacteria, more nematodes, more worms, more fungus because they're breaking down the wood. It's the same ingredients everywhere, just in different ratios. A few years ago, there was this really famous research paper that came out in Science magazine where they measured what's in dirt. Some of you saw the movie last week, and so you might already know about this. In one handful of really good soil, and keep in mind this is really good soil, like in a cared for garden or like in a really good forest ecosystem. But check out these numbers. 1 trillion with a T bacteria, 10,000 protozoans, 10,000 nematodes, and about 25 kilometers of fungal fibers breaking down wood in a handful of soil. I mean, they're really small, so when I say a trillion, kids are like, trillion. Like, no, for real, like, they're really small, but think about this now. If you've got 10,000 protozoas, you can see those with your naked eye sometimes, 10,000 nematodes, some of which you can see with your naked eye, 1 trillion bacteria, 25 kilometers of fungi. You've got bugs that shred plant tissue. You've got bugs that eat other bugs. You've got worms that eat fungus and bacteria. You've got fungi that break down wood only. You've got nematodes that eat roots. When that whole food web is eating something, you know they're also pooping, right? And some of that poop comes in water-soluble form, and roots can soak up those nutrients. Some of that poop is required for a chemical reaction that makes gases or that helps gases get fixed into something usable. We're talking a really complex food web, so energy and nutrients are always bouncing around, and that's the secret for plant life. Remember, like we were talking yesterday, the balanced diet issue? Like, the best balanced diet you can possibly make for soil is all those different organisms hunting each other and eating each other and digesting and pooping. So the A horizon is the topsoil. What makes it the topsoil is the decomposing organic material, this stuff. And that whole soil food web, which is built on these inputs, the chump change of which is all the nutrients required for plant life. This is the magic of topsoil. This is like the one thing we can't do better than dirt does. So a lot of students were asking about the E horizon. That's basically a boundary. So between the A, which is topsoil, watch me, A, topsoil, B, subsoil. Some nerds talk about the E horizon, which is the boundary between the A and the B. It's called the E horizon, is the zone of leaching. That's where nutrients soak past that point into the subsoil, but the life stuff does not. So the zone of leaching is where water carries nutrients to subsoil.
It said in the book that A and O are also in the zone of leaching.
Oh, because water can leach the O and the A. Yeah, I could see that, I suppose. Sure. I wanted to signify that it's defined by that boundary, and yeah, I could see that would... Okay, fine. So, I may be mistaken that it also includes the O and the A. Concept is that's where water carries nutrients from there to the subsoil. Anybody want to talk more soil food web? Number 18 had 2 things you were supposed to describe. We've talked about them, contour plowing and no-till agriculture. But I have some more to add, other ways to avoid erosion. The book says contour plowing and no-till. I would like you to add in your notes, please, for number 18, erosion is not desertification, and anything that helps you avoid desertification, like crop rotation and cover cropping. If you can keep it from turning into desert, you can keep it from flying away. So, crop rotation and cover cropping to avoid desertification. Also, strip and alley cropping to block wind erosion. I believe all of those terms have come up before. I just want to remind you that now that we're organizing it this way, there are other ways to prevent erosion and desertification. Study goal 19 about pesticide. I worry that when I start talking about study goal 19 about pesticides, a lot of my kids kind of get confused by some of the details that aren't necessarily going to be on the AP test. So I just want to make sure you got a couple of basics. The first type of pesticide was just toxic elements, like stuff you find in a mine that's toxic. Like, wow, there's no plants growing over here. I wonder why. You feed the dirt to a prisoner or a goat and they die, and it's like, oh wow, toxic dirt. Maybe I can spray some of that dirt on top of my farm and that'll kill the bugs. So does everybody know what arsenic is? It's a type of rat poison, right? Rat poison has arsenic in it? So apparently arsenic was like one of the very first pesticides. And people would like mine arsenic and take the powder and just throw it on the crop to kill all of the bugs. And this is like, I'm talking long time ago, like dawn of agriculture pesticide. All the way up until the beginning of this century, basically. Beginning of the 19th century. 20th century? God, the 1900s, there we go. All the way up to the 1900s, people were using elemental pesticides. Toxic elements, like arsenic, lead, whatever. Got into spraying like plant chemicals that are toxic in liquid form. So one of the first globally used pesticides was nicotine from tobacco. You all know that plants grow nicotine to kill insects? So nicotine is a naturally occurring pesticide? Yeah.
Isn't arsenic in cigarettes too? Yeah.
If it is, not because the plants grow arsenic.
It's added.
Yeah, I mean, cigarettes have a ton of weird additives that are supposed to either give it smoking characteristics or smoldering so that like the cherry will stay lit in the cigarette or whatever. The third wave of pesticides, though, that's like the 1950s, like the crazy human synthesized chemicals. This is when you heard of like DDT, for example. That's the 1950s. And at that time, I mean, this is like a classic, the classic story of wish I'd thought of this earlier. In the 1950s, we wanted pesticides that would stay for a long time so you didn't have to spray them often. We built very stable chemicals. DDT, once you've built it in a lab, that chemical stays perfectly DDT for like thousands of years. Does anybody know why we would want stable chemicals?
So that you don't have to spray a lot of it?
Exactly, so you don't have to keep spraying over and over. whatever you spray will hopefully stay on the farm. Anybody see the flip side of that? Why is that a problem?
It stays in your body.
Right, it's stable. So it'll survive if it gets into the stream, it'll survive if it gets into the bug, it'll survive if it gets into the fish, and it'll still be that same toxic chemical when it gets into you. So in the 1950s, everybody was excited about stability until the 1960s when everybody was pissed about stability. Right around the time you were born, we were really honing in on very narrow spectrum pesticides. Stuff that's really targeted, so it just kills that one bug. Or it just prevents that one biological process. Or it just keeps the eggs from hatching of the bugs or whatever. And nowadays, this is the part that wasn't in your book. The future of pesticides now, what people get really excited about, is the opposite of stability. We want pesticides that will disassociate. Anybody know what that means?
Go away. Completely.
Yeah, chemicals that fall apart. So either when they get wet, they dissolve, they stop being the toxic chemical when they need water. That's called hydrodissociation. Or even better, this is like some cool science fiction stuff. Either hydro or photo dissociation. Imagine a chemical that breaks down when sunlight hits it. You spray the chemical at sunset, all night long it kills the bugs, sun comes out tomorrow, and you're ready to harvest by the next day because one day of sunlight will tear apart the chemical that's deadly. Nowadays, chemistry is pushing pesticides to not be long-lasting. This is one of the reasons that many of your pesticides aren't ending up in your food supply. Because they're the opposite of stable stuff from the 50s. Yeah?
For number 19, I didn't find it. It said, what are the different types of biological control?
So, biological control is either like predators or diseases for pests. And there's like another study goal in the reader that we'll come back to when we get to that point about whether you're like boosting native predators or you're like providing homes for native bugs that eat bad bugs or something. So we'll come back to that.
The examples of both.
I don't have that in my notes. I don't know. Oh, maybe the examples of the pesticides. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, so examples of pesticide would be like arsenic was an elemental pesticide, nicotine is a plant-based one, DDT is a synthetic one, and ladybugs are biological control. Students, for number 20, what is integration? Like, what does it mean when you integrate schools, for example? What's integration?
Bringing one thing into another.
Yeah, to mix stuff together. So, a lot of people think that integrated pest management means no chemicals, but it just means use everything else before you use chemicals, to lower chemicals. Integrated pest management is a whole bunch of stuff. With chemicals is kind of the last resort. And your book had the concept, but not all the options. So I've got a few to add that your book didn't mention. Some features of integrated pest management: you can rotate crops so the bugs don't ever reach those super high populations. You can change how and when you irrigate. So you either knock them off with water or you dry them out by irrigating away from them or whatever. Crop rotation, irrigation methods or timing. You can increase airflow. A lot of bugs only live in places where the air is very still. So by letting the wind come through, like spacing out the rows better. There's a concept called companion planting. Like if you plant garlic with your tomatoes, the bugs that eat tomato root won't walk past the garlic. Companion planting, where you plant something the bugs hate right next to the stuff that the bugs like. Companion planting. You put bug repellent next to bait. And there's something that's become like a really big trend in agriculture in the last few years. It's called native insectary planting. Your book didn't mention this one either. But in a lot of farms, I mean, imagine if you have like 100 acres of broccoli and a broccoli bug lands in the middle. Can you imagine what a party that is for the broccoli bug? It's like, holy crap, we get to eat. There's nothing else around. We just eat and breed and eat and breed. So what a lot of people have started doing is to break up farms with little pockets of native habitat. How many of you have seen the garden that I run down below the building here, like down over by Vada and stuff? If you ever walk by there, there's like row crops, and right at the end there's this like pretty dried out looking kind of ratty garden. Those are all native plants, and the idea there is we give a home for local beneficial bugs. It's like a house for spiders that will eat the bugs we don't want in the garden. Native insectary planting, like native plants to provide a home for the insects. The idea being, try to use less chemicals if you can. IPM. Yeah.
Do you use any pesticides on that garden?
No.
Yeah.
I've 11 years never used any pesticides out there. Although, well, that's not entirely true. Starting like tonight/tomorrow, we're going to start poisoning mice in there. And I have poisoned rats inside of a building. And it's not an insecticide, but we're doing that because it's been really difficult to battle the rodents and they're kind of ruining the greenhouse. And I have used an organic spray to keep aphids out of the greenhouse. We had an aphid infestation a few years ago. So we used what's called the Cornell solution, which is like dish soap and water and like garlic oil or olive oil or something. And I have used a nicotine spray. I didn't use it, but someone else who was watching the garden used it along the fence line to kill weeds once. Number 21, I have to say, I'm not sure that the book really talks about the concerns over genetically modified crops. This is such like a complicated study goal. I really struggle to explain all of this stuff because a lot of my students don't understand like the basics of genetics or the basics of biology, and so I just don't know how far back to go with this. I'm going to try to break this down if I can. One problem that people are worried about is genetic contamination, the idea that man-made genes will spread to wild populations. So if there is a problem, that problem gene will get into native corn, for example. or native grasses. That's called genetic contamination. And I wish I had the time to explain all the details, but just trust me, that's one of the things that people are worried about. Something else that people are worried about is different types of genetic modification make it harder to save seeds. Do you all realize that in most parts of the world, farmers don't buy their seed, they save their own seed? You understand that you can like grow corn and dry it out and then plant new corn from that dried corn? And there are different types of genetic modification that make it harder to save seed. That has a lot of impact on farmers around the world, especially if they get genetic contamination, all of a sudden their seeds don't work. There are really clearly documented examples of whole communities where everybody saves their corn, for example, and one year the corn doesn't grow because it's been contaminated by some modified gene that keeps the seeds from sprouting. Number 3, there's this really weird invention. It's called the Terminator gene. The Terminator gene is a self-destruct gene. It makes DNA non-viable. Anybody know why a seed company would invent a genetic self-destruct gene?
You have to keep buying their seeds.
That's right. God forbid you would keep your own. What has scared many people is that Terminator genes will contaminate somebody's seed source. You understand what I'm saying by that? That if James Mell is growing GMO corn, that corn, you don't want the seeds to keep growing. You know, the seed seller doesn't want him to keep his own seeds, so the seed seller puts a Terminator gene so that his DNA won't make usable seeds next time. The Terminator gene is in his GMO crop. If pollen from his corn lands in your farm and you've got your healthy organic stuff, all of a sudden that Terminator gene keeps your seeds from sprouting. Right? When your seeds have his genes in them, they stop working. So the fear is that Terminator genes will contaminate people's seeds. Yeah.
Is that what like the Monsanto farm does for like the people that use Terminator genes?
Many companies have used Terminator genes. Monsanto being the biggest has basically used a little of everything over the time. Savala?
Do you know where exactly was the corner or no?
Yeah, he's a deeper or less.
It was just on Olive Street. Like,
Was it like right at the cross section or? Because I just ran out there.
No, he's below.
Oh, it was below. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
And David, I think I sent you a message. Somebody said Olive and Carrillo. Does that sound right?
it was down. I'm not sure which street though.
Okay. Cool.
Not that far.
Not that far, okay. But there are two other problems that I want to be really clear about that I think are more global than the details about genetic contamination, which might confuse you. We've had very limited health testing. This is based on a concept that a lot of you don't know about biology, so I just got to tell you this one detail. Not all genes have a single effect. Something that we've realized very recently is that a lot of genes have multiple outcomes. So we put a gene in strawberries to make them sweeter, and coincidentally that could also make them darker. Or coincidentally that could also make them fuzzier. Who cares about that? What if it also makes them produce an allergen, and we find out because the guy with peanut allergies died eating a strawberry? Just so you know, genetics is complicated. it's impossible to test every possibility. So a lot of genes will have multiple functions. You use the gene to make it sweeter. What if it makes it toxic to tall people or some weird genetic outcome that we're not ready for? The scary part is the limited health testing with unintended consequences. And finally, probably the biggest political issue now with GMOs is the labeling. That in the United States and a few other countries, they don't have to tell you if it's in your food. Like in Europe, they do have to label it. In this country, they don't. Okay.
Why is that?
Man, I'm so biased about this that I probably can't give you a politically careful answer. So, because the corporations don't want you to know.
Like lobbyists or something?
Yeah. Like the public has an overwhelming preference. Of all the states tested in the United States, the lowest preference was 70% of the public wants labeling. In some states, it's up to 95% of the public wants labeling. Like, wouldn't you like to know? But you know, the lobbyist groups have kind of like convinced the government that you don't need to know, or even better, that it's better if you don't know. The argument is the public doesn't understand. There's no science, it's bad, but the public is a bunch of idiots, so if we tell them, they're going to make sloppy decisions that hurt the economy. That's the lobbyist argument. And the judge is like, yeah, stupid public, they always will protect them from themselves. Yes? Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, if there was that law, like last year, wasn't there a law about like GMOs and everything?
2 years ago, there was a state proposition about labeling GMOs. I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, how'd that not pass then if everybody wanted it?
Because that was the largest infusion of lobbying money to a state proposition in the history of the United States of America. The yes on labeling side of the campaign was outspent in the last 2 weeks by a factor of 40 to 1, I believe. They claimed that it would make food more expensive and ran ads all over the state saying, we don't need this, it hurts farmers. And a lot of people were like, wait, they already have to label what's in the food, it's just another part of the label, how's that going to change pricing? And the argument was that it's hard to track ingredients. That's true, but my point is, I still want them to track ingredients. And so it might have raised the price of some foods theoretically by a small amount, but I think most of us are okay with that. It was just like, it was the biggest lobbying expense for a state. And do you know that Measure P is now the biggest lobbyist expense against the local measure? Both in California. We've had the two biggest lobbying expenses to stop a voter-led drive. Our GMO labeling 2 years ago and our ban on certain petroleum activity now. You can't ask me to talk about politics. Yeah. Go ask Fox News. They'll straighten you right out. They'll straighten you right out. Number 23, I don't really want to talk about it. Number 24, I don't really want to talk about it. Unless you have questions. Yeah. So, especially areas with limited water. You know that soil food web requires a lot of water to keep all those microbes alive. If you have really limited rainfall, you're already halfway to being a desert. You know what I'm saying? Like desertification with really low rainfall, it happens more easily. Like Santa Barbara is basically desertified no matter what you do. The only parts of Santa Barbara where you can grow food are valleys. Here's an amazing, shocking news flash. Period 2 is by far the furthest along. And so I don't want to get too much further ahead. I can answer any questions you have on 4.1 or 4.2, but I don't want to start 4.3 until tomorrow. Well?
What are the potential benefits from grazing?
Well, you understand the predator effect issue? So, apparently, a little bit of grazing maintains diversity. It's like the predator effect issue. And sometimes when you run grazing animals, you know, they're going to poop a lot of fertilizer. And so you get like little bits of nutrient cycling. And sometimes weed control. What else? Yes?
Well, for our pre-lab and our post-lab, like, what are the observations? Like, are those just things that we're observing during the lab, or?
Are you talking about the soil? For salinization, you'll open the box
Okay, so that's like that.
on like Monday of next week. And when you open the box, you'll count how many sprouts you have of each type. And those are going to be the observations for the salinization to see what percentage sprouted in each concentration of salt. Yeah?
Is there anything else besides having a soil sample that we need to bring to be prepared?
The pre-lab. Pre-lab. Pre-lab and soil sample. Yes?
So, desertification is like the less quality of soil. So, is that only in like dry land ecosystems, or?
It happens much more quickly in dry land ecosystems because a lot of times there's decomposition that's not. Remember we was talking about the zone of leaching is that OA like area where all the water carries nutrients around. Well, with less water, you got less nutrients getting carried around. You got less decomposition, less bacteria survive. So drier areas desertify faster, but you can technically desertify anything you want. What else? We are the period that's furthest along, so we can switch gears to story time or whatever, but I want to make sure we're done with 4.1 or 4.2 first, yeah?
What's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
Nobody wants to ask you anything else?